Hello, good day, dear audience, ladies and gentlemen. Today we start a Basis of Business Communication Part 1 course. My name is Julia Jacquemot and I will be with you during this course. So we will first discuss here what we need to expect out of this session. So firstly, I will be speaking about communication, what that means, the basic concepts of communication, the model of communication. Then we will discuss about the barriers of communication and 7 communication skills which are absolutely crucial for effective communication. So let's move on. First of all, what communication means? That's of course a two-way process where there is a sender and receiver. So that means that somebody needs to send information, somebody has to receive it. So basically it is message exchange between two parties. You can say that it is also interaction process between people with certain goals. So there are certain aims of the whole process. In order communication to be effective, that should always be aimed at something, and it should be aimed at somebody. So that's a key issue here. Very often people speak about communication and would like to increase it and be more effective, etc. But the crucial thing here is to think to who you communicate and what is your message. So that is the basis of this course, and we will learn today what does that mean. This basically is the transactional model of communication, very popular one, and that explains the whole process very clearly here. So we have on the left a sender, you see on the slide, who chooses a channel and chooses the message. On the other side, with the pink color, you see the receiver, who at the same time becomes a sender. Why he or she becomes a sender? Because there is always a process of feedback involved. Without feedback, there is no communication. That would be just one-way process. Feedback is absolutely crucial. We may wonder, is there always a feedback? For example, Victor Hugo wrote a book, and what is the feedback? Now I am reading it 150 years later. Yes, I am again a sender of communication. He, when he was creating this process, could expect my reaction, and he had received critique during his time. Now I am, as a receiver, getting feedback and giving feedback not to him but also to other people, readers of Victor Hugo and so on. So that sometimes becomes an abstract process, not really immediately possible. But we go back to organizational business context, which is maybe not so into creativity when we compare with artistic creations, but something which is happening on a daily basis. And in our daily basis, we see feedback immediately, more or less. Of course, there are some projects, strategic goals for organization when feedback comes later, is stakeholder dialogues, when we start something doing for our company and with our company, and it has impact on climate, it has impact on maybe stakeholder dialogue partners like governmental, non-governmental organizations later. Maybe it is future generations. So again, feedback can come later, not immediately. But feedback comes, and that's important part for communicational process. Let's see here, there is also a channel we see. So depending on our aims, we choose and we select the correct channel. Okay, here is another way of looking at this scheme. Maybe it's more clear here. You see sender. The whole process here also involves on the green, you see encoding moment. And another one is decoding. So with encoding, we need to certain concepts, certain arguments, wrap in certain words. So another person, party, maybe a group of people receive it and will be able to unwrap it. So unwrapping is called decoding. And wrapping of the words, if it is maybe oral presentation or talk, it is encoding. But it's not necessarily is always oral, it can be written. For example, you want to write a certain message, and that will also be encoding. You choose, select concrete words, maybe with concrete punctuation, and that altogether gives intonation and creates a message tone, creates message meaning. So that is called encoding moment. To be again effective communicator, we have to select very well what are the means for our encoding, what are the instruments, how do we encode, and which words we select, so the audience can receive. We must help the receiver to get it. Also, receiver, on the other hand, should have certain instruments. It can be linguistic skills, it can be let's say semantic skills, cultural awareness, emotional intelligence, other skills which permit him or her to give back a feedback and also receive, actually, in the first place, the message. As we see from this model, and as we understand, here can be lots of distractions, and that's the main problem for communication, and that's what happens. The reason for conflicts lies in this actually sphere, that people either do not select audience correctly, so they choose encoding moments in a very destructive for this audience manner. Maybe it is certain professional jargon, maybe it is certain professional slang, which auditory of this particular age group or profession do not understand. So altogether, this is a model of communication process, and if you would like to be a very good communicator, we should keep this in mind. So let's continue. Here the same thing is explained again. We have communicator, we have message, we have receiver, and we have feedback. Communicator thinks of something in the mind, for example, a tree, and this has to be called the way that receiver receives this message, and also has the same image in his brain or her brain. So the problem here starts that we might have different experience, life experience. If you think of bird, we might not imagine that another person is thinking of penguin at this moment. Or if you think of tree, if you live in one area, you might think of palm. But as I'm coming from Latvia, I don't think trivially as a palm. It comes to my mind another tree. So it might be some misunderstandings in this moment. And of course, we need clearness. So let's look at this slide. Here we see that what happens in our brains is very messy process, very messy things. We would like to receive message clearly, or we have good intentions, but maybe another person has certain other intentions. Maybe there are psychological intentions to persuade, to manage situation in a certain way. Another person is sensitive to that. There might be power relationship, there might be other conflicting relationship between people, there can be cultural predispositions, stereotyping, halo effects as to the speaker or receiver of the information. And we constantly give feedback and we constantly exchange our views on something. This feedback is not necessarily audio in a sense that it is not only verbal, but it can be unverbal feedback. We see how we smile, we see how the intonation moves on, we see the differences, and we read it and we give back our impulses. And again, another person analyzes them and make corrections and so on. So when the scheme before demonstrated communication process, it was more linear, but in reality it happens much more in a complicated way, Okay, so to sum up, we need message, we need communicator who gives this message, we need channel, whether it will be written form, oral form, maybe it will be a radio message, it will be maybe like we use here, a platform which is, this is also a channel which is used to communicate with you, dear audience. So later we have receiver, who also needs to decode the information and give a feedback so that the sender receives the feedback and again encodes information and the process moves on. But it is always a two-way process. Okay, as mentioned before, we have certain barriers for communication. I was speaking about mess, what happens during communication process. Well, there are many approaches which structure barriers in certain groups. Here I refer to one which very well looks at the basis of different barriers. Interpersonal barriers. That is something to do with our psychological profiles, our differences. It can be temperament differences, cognitive style differences, our knowledge, our maybe experience, and it can be power relationship and something else, what we have with two parties in communication, and they can create barriers that should be addressed or should be also understood. Sometimes they are necessary. Not all the barriers are necessarily immediately to eliminate. We have them and it is to accept it. But sometimes interpersonal barriers completely distort information. So we cannot perceive information per se. We start to see it from the prism of our, for example, hate towards this person, or enviness towards this person, or something which another person told us about this one. So we become involved personally, and that of course may sometimes give a certain filter on the message and, let's say, disturb the perception of the information. Okay, another barrier is linguistic one. So about linguistic, it can be some phonetic, it can be lack of understanding of vocabulary, it can be problems of putting this and choosing correct wording. It is some problems of understanding. For example, when we have courses of general psychology and the first year students and they forget the meaning and you use words like frustration and you use agony, anxiety, and maybe students cannot grasp the meaning immediately. Of course, it can create some problems. Or in my case, when I was studying MBA classes, it was also some problems for understanding financial courses, and which is normal for finance professor. The words and terms for me was difficult to grasp, and it was a barrier because I couldn't proceed with his idea what he is going to tell us the next paragraph. So, physical barriers. It can be our distance one from another. It can be our space, our perception. It can be also our lighting in the room. It can be noise in the room if somebody entered to the room, and it can destroy further communication. It can also be different other physical moment of the destruction factors. For example, very difficult for students, of course, to concentrate on exam when tram passes or very loud child cry in the next room. It seldom happens, but it does. And well, it can be some other physical distractors. Cultural background. For example, we analyzed with students from France the habit of drinking wine after food, and for them they were saying, yes, oh, we miss it a lot, so good wine. And we had students from Uzbekistan, and they were really shocked about this discussion. They thought, how come you speak something like that? And women drink wine like usual thing. So that's a short example to see that sometimes we have misunderstanding and start to create maybe bad image of one party or another in communicational process. It can be many others. It is power, distance, other aspects. I will be speaking about it in another moments during this course. Organizational, it is also different divisions, how the tasks are spread in organization, and it can create certain barriers, like who are you to tell me this task? Who am I giving, or am I supposed to report this thing? And that can create also certain barriers in the flow of communication. We have also personal level barriers, so let's go to an individual or personal level. That means we have certain selective attention. We would like to be maybe clear, open-minded, completely free from prejudices, and we would like to really perceive information as it comes. But what happens, we have certain schemas, something which is actual for us for this period of our life. And this makes certain distortion. We hear certain words which come up with this information, and we are sensitive to this. If these wording are coming, we are interested. If these words are absent, we are not interested. We lose attention, we lose motivation of listening. So we have also our selective attention. It can be political views, it can be our opinions of something, it can be our desires and some other things like hobbies which impact here. Lack of knowledge. You might not have enough knowledge in the process in this topic of communication. So lack of knowledge. If somebody starts speaking to you the way or the topic that we are absolutely unaware of, it's very difficult to keep our attention up and ask good questions. We just maybe are polite and wait for when the meeting will finish. But sometimes people just leave because they think, well, it's not a topic of my interest and I don't have any knowledge of this. Okay, lack of vocabulary. We know little children, they have some good intentions to express themselves and they find words which are available for them at this moment. And there are many other examples. When we learn language, we would like to express ourselves better, but we have lack of knowledge, we have lack of this vocabulary, we cannot put it in a good way, yes, in a wording so people understand us. And of course miscommunication appears. Once happened to me in China that people who were welcoming tourists to the restaurants, they were speaking English, so 2-3 phrases, etc. And we thought, oh good, here they speak English, maybe we can understand better what we can order for meal. But actually in menu and later the waiter couldn't speak English and we had very big misunderstandings as to what we have ordered. But okay, it was we survived. Lack of listening skills, that's of course very important moment, is absolutely emphasized in all the book on communication skills. We have to listen to another partner, we have to understand situation, we have to listen also unverbal signs. When another person is in a certain mood, we have to read it. When another person is giving us a message, are we ready to receive it? Are we ready to perceive it? Is that a question to be asked? Okay. In order to reduce barriers, we should think of source. Where does it come from? Is it valid? Is it reliable? Is there a research done? Can we trust the source? Why we should trust? Why should you trust me? Message. It should be precise, should be concrete, should be based on common logic rules. Formulation. It should not be too complicated, although 19th century prose, of course, required long sentences and complicated way of speaking and maybe different than today. Today, in our organizational business context, more precise sentences are appreciated. So think of that. What is your message to your employees, to your colleagues, to your students, to your leaders? What is the message to your child, to your husband, friend, girlfriend, etc.? Think of formulation of what really we need to say. Channel, how do we say? What is the means by what we say that? And decoding process. Are we really able to receive another person's message? That we also should think of. Okay. How would you describe what good communication is? If you sit back and think, well, for me, good communication, when do you reflect about it? So think yourself, think for a moment, oh, I had good communication with my friend. Do you have certain moments for yourself that you can refer to, saying that it was good communication? That's an important question to ask. Why we need a good communication? Is it okay just any communication? Why? How? When? If we build our message around this second question, that can also be very helpful. Do I need good communication now? What I imply by that? What another person came for? And what can we both expect if it is two partners? If more than more, of course. What are the greatest challenges of good communication? It was a little bit described on previous slides, but it's very important that we think of it personally. What are my challenges on this meeting? How important is listening? Am I listening to my partner? Am I listening to what the message is? Am I maybe interrupting my partner? Maybe I already prepared the answer in my mind, and this answer is brightly sticks so much, so definitely in my brain that I do not hear the partner. And how do we measure effective communication? So if you answer honestly those questions, we basically are done with this course. We are basically gurus in communication. We need to know that effective communication is a two-way process. Is sending the right message and sending to the right person. Good, effective communication is aimed at result. Effective communication helps to understand the person or situation in a better way, and it enables to solve problem, builds trust, and also is serving sustainable goals, if we wish to think of it in these terms. Because if we have good, effective communication, we do not lose time, we appreciate each other, we respect each other, and that, of course, has a contribution for society in general terms. So it actually is a healthy process. Correct and effective communication saves time, makes us more happy and satisfied with our life. Speaking about communication skills and abilities, we should divide them into speaking, writing, listening, and reading. So all of these sets of abilities, I will be speaking about it on the next session, a little bit, but it requires certain attention. But now I would like to proceed with general, each day, basic communication skills. Listening is really everywhere emphasized. Good salespeople, good teachers, good leaders, they are able, they learn to listen. Straight talking, so if you have a message, you have to say it directly. Nonverbal communication, use of nonverbal communication. It means that you are also able to understand, predict, be person who is reflective of imagining what can be your nonverbal signs and how can they be read from another side, from another person perspective. Emotional control. Well, that's a difficult moment, of course. We have our different emotions, different moods, etc. It doesn't mean that we hide our emotions, but that we have to name them for ourselves. If we are irritated, we call it irritation. If we are angry, we are aware that we are angry at this moment. And so what we can do about it? If we have very little time, we should restructure ourselves, take a breath and move on. If we have more time for relaxing, for going, listening music, taking maybe a gym or something else, cool down, it depends, of course, on the communication. If we have very strong conflict situation, of course, we pause on this moment and we go, relax, we try to restructure, and we go maybe seek for help of a third party, maybe mediator or other people who can be involved, and we try to solve problem in certain different epoch, no, but from one place we move to maybe another time and another time again, so we meet not at one immediately context, but it should have time for rethinking, etc. So it depends what communication and what stage we are, speaking of emotional control. And another very emphasized skill, basically it involves many skills under this, negotiations. Negotiation skill, it requires lots of emotional intelligence again, it requires your confidence, it requires listening. Many different authors, here is a bit of overlap of concepts. BATNA stands for Best Approach to Negotiation Agreement. So we have negotiation agreement with another partner, and what is our best approach? So if we know our best approach, our strong sides, our weak sides, we can predict the reaction of other people, we can also, reading the signs of other people, their reaction, build more constructive and effective communication. Okay. Here is one quotation. Does it refer to you? Through my work experience and education, I have developed strong communication skills and I'm able to clearly convey points to different audiences. I'm also a good listener. I'm very sorry. This is a quotation. Through my work experience and education, I have developed strong communication skills and I'm able to clearly convey points to different audiences. I'm also a good listener, which aids in my ability to intimately understand the situation and prepare an appropriate response. So, I guess if you work in academic field, if you work with people, if you learn something from each other, you are able to give, you are able to share your knowledge, you are able to receive, that should refer to you. And I am absolutely positive about it, that you have very strong background on communication skills and abilities. So this course is, of course, to remind yourself and maybe sometimes to check, but it's definitely not to under-evaluate your skills and abilities, which you already have till now. So communication is defined as transferring information to produce greater understanding. Let's move on. Effective communication, again, as we see, open-mindedness, active listening, reflection, negotiation, and of course signs of nonverbal communication, which has to be read and has to be transferred. Okay, if we answer here on the 4 questions, maybe this also helps us to build good communication with teenagers, with difficult students, difficult colleagues, difficult ourselves when we communicate internally with ourselves. So, what are the 4 main objectives? We want to be understood. We want to understand others. Thirdly, we want to gain acceptance for ourselves and our ideas. It's a self-respect thing, it's a self-image thing, self-esteem moment. And finally, we want to produce an action as a result of any communication. Maybe an action was to have a joyful party. Maybe an action was also to create a concrete result for after this meeting in your organization. What is the aim? The purpose of effective communication is to get your specific audience to the desired goal. The goal could be informing them or allowing them to understand a message. So, in the next sessions, we will be speaking about leadership in communication. And of course, here the keyword here comes convincing them to take an action. So, we inform, we request something, we persuade, and we build relationship. I absolutely like TAO basis for communication, and effective communication is understood here as a balance between the sender and the receiver. No one of the parties should lose the face. We should build a rapport with another person in a way that another person doesn't lose the face, but we do not allow other partner to make us to lose the face either. That's a high, of course, art, and we learn it full our life. Well, maybe this can help us. Completeness. The message, the information, in a sense, should be complete in organizational context with students, with parents, with our teenage son or maybe daughter or friend. It's very important that we have received complete information, like what is expected, why, when, etc. Of course, there are some techniques of creative thinking, yes, and making other people to think creatively. That means that we should maybe leave open-ended questions. In that case, it's not completely complete, yes, sorry, but is really open-ended. But the message should be done in a way that it is not turned on people that they absolutely are lost, absolutely do not understand what happens to them, and start to have anxiety to a degree that they lose motivation in what they are doing. Conciseness. Conciseness means communicating what you want to convey in the least possible words. Sometimes we speak too much. Consideration. One must take audience into consideration. Clarity implies emphasizing on specific goal or objective at a time rather than trying to move away from a track. Of course, we have different conflict resolution techniques, and sometimes it is good to move away from a track. Maybe we don't want to propose now bigger conflict, and we move away a little bit and we change and we maybe put another attention on the topic. But altogether, message today, maybe we postpone conflict situation, resolving of conflicts, but that must be also clearly told that today let's not speak about it, or okay, another person also receives the hints and stuff. Today, now is not a good time for doing this. Concreteness. It's connected with clarity, of course. Being particular and clear rather than fuzzy and general. Courtesy, being polite, knowing etiquette, and being enthusiastic about what we are doing. Correctness implies the correct information. So, for example, we are not lying to each other, we are not doing something which is awkward, and we just do not share knowledge, it's not totally knowledge. Communication skills. As mentioned before, so they can be verbal and non-verbal. I'll be speaking about it on the next session, but on both sides, you see, we have in verbal moment, it is articulation and explanation. In non-verbal is confidence. In clarity is very important for verbal. Negotiation, persuasion skills, presentation, public speaking. And in non-verbal we go into life skills. Well, how is that? It's totally not possible to put it in this small, short module. So we learn it during life, yeah? We observe other people's behavior and we do it. Active listening, kinesthetic abilities, how we touch, how we use air, how we feel it, how we move. Knowledge and application of etiquette applies to both. Self-promotion applies to both. Knowledge of language applies to both, because language can be also non-verbal language, and emotional intelligence. Well, this is just to think about, and thank you for your attention. I hope it was useful, and if you have questions or you would like to give your feedback, please contact me. Thank you.